Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Joke Rogers here in Lagos. We begin in Russia today, where at least one person has been killed and hundreds left homeless after a major fire swept through a village just east of Moscow's Urals mountains. Video footage showed flames raging across the horizon, engulfing houses and trees, while smoke blocked out the sky in Sosva, east of Moscow. Russia's Federal Penitentiary Service had set up an investigative board to look into the circumstances of the incident. Authorities did not say what caused the fire, but investigators have opened criminal cases for negligence and causing death by negligence. Hundreds of firefighters battled through the night to counter the flames, which swept across dry ground, fanned by a strong wind. Staying in Russia, the country's state news agency says Moscow has begun using its new T-14 Armata battle tanks to fire on Ukrainian positions, but they have not yet participated in direct assault operations. It says the tanks have been fitted with extra protection on their flanks, and crews have undergone combat coordination at training grounds in Ukraine. The T-14 tank has an unmanned turret, and its crew remotely control the armaments from an isolated armored capsule located in front of the hull. The tanks have a maximum speed of 80 kilometers per hour. In January, British military intelligence reported that Russian forces in Ukraine were reluctant to accept the first tranche of the tanks because of their poor condition. It also said any deployment of the T-14 would likely be a high-risk decision for Russia and one taken primarily for propaganda purposes. Meanwhile, the German Air Force says it has intercepted 3 Russian military aircraft flying without transponder signals in international airspace over the Baltic Sea. Germany and Britain sent Eurofighter jets to identify the 2 Sukhoi Su-27 fighter aircraft and 1 Ilyushin Il-20 aircraft. The German Air Force posted several images of the Russian aircraft mid-flight, which it said were taken on April the 25th. Russian military aircraft regularly fly from mainland Russia to Kaliningrad and back, meaning that such encounters are fairly routine in the region. Germany handed over responsibility for NATO's Baltic air policing mission to Britain earlier this month. NATO allies pitch in to protect the airspace because Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia do not have their own fighter jets. And multiple explosions resounded in parts of eastern Donetsk region today as Ukrainian servicemen fired a Soviet-made Howitzer towards Russian positions. Stationed near the city of Bakhmut, which saw the bloodiest fighting since February 2022, 24-year-old Sergei from Mariupol said his unit was focusing primarily on destroying hardware. Russia said its forces had advanced in Bakhmut, while a top Ukrainian commander said his troops were holding the front line through the city. The Russian Defense Ministry said its forces had secured 2 blocks in western districts and airborne units were providing reinforcements to the north and south. Russia sees Bakhmut as a stepping stone to more advances in eastern Ukraine. Former workers at the Chernobyl power plant have held a candlelight vigil to mark 37 years since the nuclear disaster. Today marks 37 years since Chernobyl, the world's worst nuclear disaster, which brought death, misery, and radioactive contamination to a large part of Eastern Europe. The infamous plant once again made headlines after being captured by Russian forces. Following weeks of fighting across the country, the power plant, now officially known as Chernobyl in Ukraine, returned to the Ukrainians in April last year after Russian soldiers pulled out from their attempt to take the capital, Kyiv. The disaster in then-Soviet Ukraine sent clouds of nuclear material across much of Europe after a botched safety test in the 4th reactor of the atomic plant. The accident killed 31 people instantly and forced tens of thousands to flee. Up to 111,000 people are thought to have died of radiation-related illnesses such as cancer, though estimates vary. Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva has criticized the Russian invasion of Ukraine, saying no one is talking about peace in what he called an insane war. Speaking during a visit to Spain, President Lula said his country is committed to finding a peace formula to end the conflict.
I understand the European view of this war. It is unacceptable that one country invades the territorial integrity of another, but it is a war in which I do not see anyone talking about peace.
And Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov says the rumors that Russian President Vladimir Putin, his body doubles and sits in a bunker are yet another lie. Mr. Peskov made the comments as part of a speech to the Nanny's Youth Forum marathon titled "The Lies About Russia." Since Russia sent tens of thousands of troops to Ukraine in February 2022, Mr. Putin has often been accused of using lookalikes or body doubles during his trips outside of Moscow, including to Russian-controlled areas of Ukraine. In January, Ukrainian military intelligence chief, Kyrylo Bundanov, said that Mr. Putin is terminally ill with cancer and has multiple body doubles.
You probably heard that Russian President Vladimir Putin has a lot of body doubles who work instead of him while he sits in a bunker. This is yet another lie. He used to be hyperactive and he's still hyperactive now. We can hardly keep up with him. You can only wish to be as healthy as he is.
Ни в каких бункерах он, конечно, никогда не сидел. Это тоже вранье.
And NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg says Georgia must uphold democratic standards ahead of a meeting with the country's Prime Minister, Irakli Garibashvili. Mr. Stoltenberg said that he welcomed Tbilisi's decision on March the 9th to scrap plans to introduce what critics called a Russian-inspired foreign agents bill, which would have required individuals and organizations that receive 20% of their funding from abroad to register with the government. Georgia applied for EU candidate status in March 2022 alongside Ukraine and Moldova, but Brussels rebuffed Tbilisi's bid, citing concerns over the rule of law and judicial independence, among other factors.
I count on Georgia to redouble efforts on domestic reforms and uphold democratic standards. That is why I welcomed the decision to withdraw the draft law on foreign influence, which was incompatible with Euro-Atlantic values and the protection of fundamental freedoms. The Georgian people have made clear that they want a democratic, prosperous country integrated into the Euro-Atlantic region.
Let's get more. The VOA's Anna Chernikova joins me now from Kyiv. Anna, good to see you today.
Good evening.
So just last week, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said all NATO allies had agreed that Ukraine will become a member. What are the implications if Ukraine joins NATO at this point in time?
As Mr. Stoltenberg visited Kyiv the first time during this full-scale invasion lately, just recently, there were a lot of talks, both from him and also from Ukrainian officials, that basically Ukraine continues its NATO progress, NATO route, this is very true that both Mr. Stoltenberg and also a number of NATO member states said in different statements that they see Ukraine as a member in the future, and that this would be supported. In terms of implications, this is, as we can see, Russian full-scale invasion created additional members of NATO. I mean, if we look at Finland, who already joined NATO just recently and became the 31st country to join NATO, we can see that NATO border with Russia increased dramatically because Finland has huge border with Russia, and Sweden is another country on the way. Basically, Russia's and what Russia was saying officially before the invasion, that they don't want to see any. They don't want to see NATO coming closer to its borders, but basically, because of the invasion with Finland, this became the case. So for Ukraine, this is something that definitely, in terms of national security, this is definitely the way to go, because this is the only guarantee at this point that Ukraine desires in terms of any security guarantees that Ukraine can get. So basically, joining NATO is the only way for Ukraine to ensure that such kind of full-scale invasions from Russia would not happen again. And definitely Ukrainian society shows an extremely huge support of this direction, and this is probably the main implication, because Ukraine during the years demonstrated that it is not an aggressive country, so Ukraine has no implications to attack anyone, but Ukraine has quite a strategic position in terms of the international map, especially European in the European region, and of course we all understand possible threats. And this is not only about Ukrainian security, but also European security. And this is exactly what Ukrainian officials are saying. And a lot of experts also are mentioning that this could create additional security guarantees for the region. So this is for the moment how Ukraine particularly see that.
Do you see a possibility that the alliance can officially welcome Ukraine even in the face of the war?
To be honest, it doesn't look like that while war is still ongoing, Ukraine will officially join. At least this is what experience shows, and this is what also NATO officials continue to repeat, that it should be the end of war before any official changes in Ukraine's status as possible NATO member could be made, and this is also why President Zelensky discussed during the visit by Mr. Stoltenberg. They discussed possible security guarantees for Ukraine before joining NATO, meaning that this could be an option in place before the end of the war. Because, of course, it's quite difficult to believe that, and to be honest, it's almost impossible to believe that country in war would join NATO while in war. At least this is something that neither experts see as an option, nor official statements by NATO officials and NATO member states, demonstrate. So, and I think that Ukrainian officials understand that. So, for the moment, what's important is that, the war should end at one point, and of course, everyone understands that this would be quite a way to go, and it would be quite a complicated negotiations and so on and so forth, because it would be quite a difficult quite a difficult thing to agree on at the end. So with both sides, as we can see, everything is deciding on the battlefield, and this would actually describe how these negotiations would go. But again, everyone also understands that at one point this negotiation should happen, and when the war officially is over, then there would be time to discuss possible membership. At least this is how it is at this point.
But Anna, this NATO membership is one of the major issues why this war is taking place in the first place. Russia does not want Ukraine to join NATO. So if the membership had been on the table before the war began, couldn't it be a consideration for Ukraine to officially join NATO? And on the back of the fact that, you remember that, an attack on one NATO member is an attack on all. And do we think that Ukraine's ascension to NATO is a threat to Russia's own security?
This is a very interesting question because, as we can see, Russia uses this narrative that it was like and this attack was because Ukraine was kind of making certain actions towards NATO. But as we can see during this first year of war, Ukraine got closer to NATO as it was never before, and even was official with President Zelensky announcing the beginning of the official procedure of joining NATO. So basically, Russian full-scale invasion made this. Made this fear of Russia that Ukraine might be getting closer to NATO as a member state, made it real. Because before, I can tell you that it was quite, so it was like 50-50 within the society in terms of the support of joining NATO. And a lot of Ukrainians, especially of the older generation, were were questioning a lot this particular step by the country. But the latest poll by the National Democratic Institute demonstrates that now, as of February 2023, 86% of Ukrainian society supports NATO, Ukraine joining NATO, and this is unprecedented number. And the support is as high as it was never before. So I think that this is just we can say that Russian politics towards Ukraine, aggressive politics, and this war particularly made this much more realistic than it was before the invasion. So this is probably would be the answer for the question. And if Russia continues to and Russia definitely would continue this narrative. At least at this point, they continue to do that. Ukraine should not join because this is a scare for Russia, and this is a risk for Russia. Well, unfortunately, in this case, Russia made it possible and made it for Ukraine. Made it as an option, almost the only option for Ukraine's own security.
So, as you mentioned earlier, Anna, you had said that there was the possibility of Ukraine joining now in the face of the war is, rather slim. And so Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban has also cast doubt on Ukraine's long-held aspiration to join the group. We know that Hungary, like all other members, can veto new members joining for whatever circumstances that might be. Do you think this is an official position of Hungary itself, or is it just the Prime Minister, speaking of his own volition?
Well, we do see with the case of Sweden that there could be obstacles and there could be difficulties for any country because every member state should support. In terms of Hungary, definitely Hungary demonstrates in different areas of its political relations with both Russia and Ukraine. They demonstrate quite a lot of support towards Russia. In a lot of questions and a lot of situations, but definitely, and Hungary would definitely be a country for Ukraine to deal with in this case, and Ukraine will have to, and probably not only Hungary. I think that Ukraine will have to negotiate a lot with different member states because some member states are very categoristic in terms of Ukraine joining. Like in terms of supporting, they're very positive and supportive. Some countries are still on 50-50 basis, and they're still thinking. But most of the countries, as we can see, are at least according again to the latest official statements that we've heard, most of the countries seem quite supportive, but definitely Ukraine will have to consider and will have to work a lot with certain member states. And I think that probably such work might already began. Of course, we don't know. It's not in the public eye, but in terms of Hungary, Ukraine has diplomatic relations with Hungary, and definitely there are certain negotiations and talks because definitely Hungary, as a member state of NATO and EU, is one of the countries that Ukraine will have to find the way to deal with, and we will see. But again, as we also can see from most of the decisions that should be taken coalitively together by the member states, either of NATO or EU, most of the time member states manage to find solution and to make sure that every country gets this it joins this position of the whole bloc. So we will see how, when time comes, how Ukraine will deal with that. But this is definitely something that should be considered by the Ukrainian authorities, and will definitely be, I guess, prioritized on the way to NATO.
Right. So finally, Anna, how much of a game changer will this be if eventually Ukraine does get to join NATO, even after the crisis is officially over? What kind of benefits will Ukraine get from being a part of NATO?
Well, first of all, security guarantees. As you mentioned before, attacking one of the NATO states is meaning attacking the whole bloc. And definitely for Ukraine, this is, at least at this point, this looks like the best security guarantee. And this is, of course, also official position of Ukraine. And both President Zelensky and also governmental officials mentioned this a lot of times already, that NATO is the best and the only security guarantee that Ukraine actually would considers for the future, to avoid future wars like this one, which is happening since 2014. And but also additionally, Ukraine is definitely a country, as we can see now, it's not only fighting for its own safety at this point, but also the safety of the European region, especially Eastern European region, because we all understand that if Ukraine falls, then the next is the NATO member states and EU member states. So for the moment, I think that, and also Ukraine is getting this very precious and very important experience on the battlefield, real battle experience. So for Ukraine, it is the best security guarantee option at this point. But also it could be Ukraine could also, get certain input in the bloc, considering this, experience that Ukraine is getting right now. So this could be quite a game changer for the region. But again, it will be also important, and the big role would be played by the results of this war.
Anna, thank you for your time.
Thank you.